I stood in the doorway of my childhood bedroom in Columbus, Ohio, and I didn't recognize a single thing inside it. The walls were repainted. My mother's quilt was gone. And where my dad used to leave me handwritten notes on the nightstand, there was a stranger's perfume bottle. She had erased me. In less than 6 weeks after burying my father, Diane had scrubbed 28 years of my life from the only home I'd ever known. If you've ever been pushed aside by someone who smiled at you in public but quietly cut you out behind closed doors, stay with me until the end of this video, because what I found in my father's safe changed everything. Let's go. My name is Nova Callahan, and I grew up in a cedar and coffee house on the east side of Columbus with the best man I've ever known. My dad, Gerald Callahan, coached Little League, brought casseroles to struggling neighbors, and called me every single Sunday without fail, even after I moved to Nashville, Tennessee at 23. My mother had passed when I was 9, and it had been just the two of us for a long time. We built something sacred in that grief. Then he met Diane Whitmore, a real estate agent from Dublin, Ohio, polished, prepared, a compliment always ready, sharper than any insult. She made my dad laugh again, and I watched him come back to life around her. So I tried. Showed up to their wedding in a sage green dress and cried real tears because he looked so happy. What I didn't see, what I was too hopeful to notice, was that Diane had never once looked at me like a stepdaughter. She looked at me like a complication. Dad was diagnosed with Parkinson's at 61. I flew back from Nashville every month. I sat with him through the hard appointments, reorganized his medications, stayed on the phone with him through his worst nights. Diane was there, physically present, appropriately sad-faced, but every time I tried to speak with Dad alone, she would appear in the doorway. Every time I asked about his will or his plans, she would answer for him. "Oh, Nova, your father and I have everything handled, sweetheart. You don't need to worry about all that." She only called me sweetheart when she was dismissing me. Dad passed on a Tuesday in March. He was 64. 300 people came to the funeral at Blendon Woods Memorial Chapel. I stood at that podium and gave everything I had. And when I looked down at the front row, Diane wasn't crying. She was scanning the room, calculating what came next. I should have trusted that feeling. 3 weeks later, I drove back to Columbus to collect my mother's things, photo albums, a jewelry box she'd carried from Savannah, Georgia, a quilt my grandmother had sewn. Diane met me at the front door and didn't open it all the way. "I donated most of that last week," she said. The house was so cluttered. Those were my mother's things, and she had thrown them away like junk. 1 month after the funeral, I sat in Attorney Martin Prescott's office in downtown Columbus, dressed in my best blazer, hoping against hope. Diane was already seated, her sister Barbara beside her, and her personal attorney, Kevin Strand, next to them with an expensive pen. Martin looked at me gently and said my father's will named Diane as the sole beneficiary of his entire estate. The house, the savings, the investments, everything. "This is what Gerald would have wanted," Diane said softly, her hand flat on the table, nails freshly done in pale pink. "He called me every Sunday," I said. "For 6 years, never missed one. You're telling me he left his only child nothing? Her expression shifted, just barely. The performed sympathy cracked for 1 second, and underneath it wasn't grief. It was satisfaction. Barbara let out a small laugh she tried to disguise as a cough. Kevin Strand kept writing. "I'm sorry, sweetheart," Diane said. I stood up, gathered my blazer, and walked out before my legs could give out. I know some of you have sat in a room just like that, dressed in your best, hoping the people who were supposed to protect you would do the right thing, and watching them choose otherwise. Being underestimated is not the end of your story. It is the beginning of your power. Keep watching. I cried somewhere around Lexington, Kentucky on the drive home, the ugly. Fizz, Tay against a steering wheel kind. And then something my father had said 18 months earlier started echoing in my head. It was a Sunday call, near the end. After we'd talked about his physical therapy and whether the tulips would survive the frost, he said, "Nova, you remember that old gray safe in the basement? Behind the water heater? I put something in there for you. Something that's yours, no matter what. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." I had thought he meant a letter, a keepsake. Sitting in that Lexington parking lot, I understood. My father had seen exactly who Diane was, and he had planned ahead. I turned the car around. I drove back to Columbus in the dark. Let myself in through the side door with the key he'd given me years ago, the one Diane didn't know existed, walked straight to the basement, and crouched behind the water heater. The gray safe was right where it had always been. I turned the combination dial left, right. Left a sequence he'd given me when I was 16, just in case. The lock clicked open. Inside, a handwritten letter, and beneath it, a sealed envelope from Hargrove and Associates, Columbus, Ohio. My hands were shaking. His handwriting was unsteady from the Parkinson's, but every word was clear. "Nova, my girl, if you're reading this, something went wrong, and I'm sorry I couldn't protect you the way I wanted to. But I can do this. I worked with attorney Dennis Hargrove to create a separate trust, funded over 3 years, established in your name alone. It's independent of everything Diane controls. It includes your grandmother's jewelry, the accounts your mother left me, and the investment portfolio I built quietly over the last decade. It was always meant for you. Call Dennis. He's been waiting. I love you more than Sundays, more than cedar, more than coffee. Your dad." The trust was valued at $1.4 million. Built quietly, carefully, invisibly, by a father who had watched what was happening in his own home and refused to let it be the ending. I called attorney Dennis Hargrove from the car. He answered on the second ring. He'd been expecting me. My father had told him I might need time. The trust was airtight, legal, and entirely separate from the estate. Diane's attorney made noise. It didn't matter. 4 months later, the courts confirmed what my father had already decided years ago. I never went to see Diane's face when she found out. I didn't need to. That was never what this was about. She got the house. She got the furniture and the vases where the family photos used to be. I got everything my father had ever meant to give me. I bought a small craftsman bungalow in East Nashville 6 months later. In the front room, I have a cedar chest. In the yard, I planted tulips. And every Sunday morning, I sit with the quiet, And I think about a man who didn't fight loudly, who didn't make scenes, who simply loved his daughter the way he always had, steadily, carefully, and always one step ahead. He didn't just leave me money. He left me proof that he had seen me. That through all those years, all those phone calls, all the Sundays he had been paying attention, he had known. And he had made sure that when the worst came, I would not be left with nothing. I was always my father's daughter. I always will be. If any part of this story felt like yours, if you've ever been overlooked by people, who should have chosen you? I hope you heard this today. The people trying to erase you are counting on your silence. They are counting on you never opening the safe. Open the safe. You deserve everything that was meant for you. If this moved you, please give it a like so others who need it can find it. Subscribe and hit the bell. We tell stories here about people who found their way back to themselves. And I don't want you to miss a single one. I'll see you in the next story.